In this video, I'm gonna show you 7 tips how you can get more bokeh, how to get more of that in your video and photos. Basically, you've probably seen some videos and photos on Instagram, for example, and YouTube videos where people are taking photos and they've got this nice blurry background, or they've got these nice circular balls of light, or you can see probably these in the movies, and you're wondering, how can I get that? So I'm gonna do 2 videos. First one, this one, is how can you get more bokeh, like generally, and then second one, I'm gonna show you how can you get more bokeh with the same lens. So let's say you're somewhere and you don't have any other equipment with you, but how can you get more of bokeh with the same lens? And bokeh, if you don't know what that means, it means blurry background. I've got my camera over here and we're gonna take some test photos and you can see how you can get more of that blurry background, that nice buttery separation from the background. Yeah, the subject is in focus and the background is nice and bokeh. Anyway, we're gonna do that now. Okay, so one of the first tips is to go closer to the subject. So I'm gonna let my subject appear from the frame. Subject comes out. First of all, I'm gonna take a photo of the subject and you can see that there is not that much of a background blur. And then I'm gonna show you how when you go closer to the subject, it gives you more blur in the background, okay? So at the moment, this is probably like 3 meters from the subject, and I'm just gonna take a picture of him. So as you can see here, there is a bit of a background blur because it's f2.2, but if I go closer, just have a look what's the difference. So over here, I'm gonna take a picture of Aaron. Exactly the same settings, but as you can see, the background is so much more blurred. And so here's just a quick little explanation. Why is that so? So basically, this is how it works. The closer you are to the camera or to your actual lens, the closest focusing distance has the most blur in the background. If the subject goes further away, depth of field will be so big that the background will be so much more in focus. So basically, if you want to have more bokeh, have the subject as close to your lens as possible. That's why when you look at macro shots, they are absolutely blurry background because they're focusing so close to the subject. Okay, this was tip 1. Let's go to tip number 2. So tip number 2 is very, very simple actually, and this is probably the most obvious thing if you don't know this, but aperture. Aperture changes a lot of the background bokeh. So the smaller the aperture number is, the more background blur you have. The smaller the aperture number is, the more light gets in, the bigger goes it lets more light in, the bigger goes the hole inside the camera that lets the light in, and the more you have blur in the background. So I'm just gonna show you 2 sample shots. We have Aaron here, just go over here. Okay, stand over that side actually. So I'm gonna take one shot of Aaron over here, and this is aperture set on f9. Okay, boom. I've got a photo of Aaron, and now I'm gonna change the aperture to the widest possible, and I'm gonna take exactly the same photo, exactly the same place again, okay? So as you can see with these 2 photos, one, when aperture is closed in, which means the number is bigger, there is so much less background blur, bokeh, and when the aperture is wide open, you've got so much more bokeh, okay? That's tip number 2. Let's go tip number 3. Tip number 3 is separate your subject from the background. So if your subject is really, really close to the background, you're not gonna get that background blur because it's just so close to the subject. So for example, at the moment, I'm gonna take a picture of Aaron here. Okay, I'm gonna take it at f1.4, trying to get exactly the same framing. Boom. You can still see that the background is in focus. Come over here now. And when we separate the subject from the background, just a few steps from the background, depending on your lens, obviously, what aperture it is. And I'm gonna take exactly the same shot, trying to frame the same. And now, boom. You can see that the background is totally different. You can't even read the words that are in that poster over there. But when he was closer to the poster, you could see, what was written over there. So Tip number 3 is separate your subject, what you want to take a picture of, from the background. So tip number 4 is wide angle lenses versus zoom lenses. Now, wide angle lenses, you're gonna have to go really, really close to the subject to get exactly the same kind of bokeh with the background. But when you've got a zoom lens, you can step so much further back and you can get so much easier bokeh. It essentially works the same as tip number 1, I think, which was that you're gonna have to move closer to the subject. When you've got a zoom lens, you can move closer to the subject and it's easier to get bokeh. But with zoom lens, it's just easier to get bokeh. So I'm gonna take a picture, just Aaron, stand somewhere over there. This is just like how easy it is. I'm gonna stand in the same spot, right? I'm gonna take a picture of Aaron. Look at the lamppost in the back over there. So this is at f4, exactly the same settings. I'm just gonna take a picture, and now I'm gonna move further in, boom. You can see the lamppost and there is so much more bokeh in that shot. So basically, if you've got a further zoomed in lens, it's easier to get bokeh. You're necessarily not getting more bokeh, but it's easier to get some. Tip number 5 is zoom lenses or zoomed in lenses versus macro lenses. So I can show you how you can get more bokeh with a macro lens because it just focuses so much closer than this one. So this is the macro 90mm f2.8, and I'm gonna zoom this lens in exactly to 90mm as well, so that you can see how with this lens I can't focus that closely because it's not meant to focus that closely, so which means I can't get that blurry background. But with this one I can go so much closer to the subject, which means I can get more bokeh, more blurry background. First shot is going to be with this. Come over here, stand over here. I'm just gonna take a picture with, by the way, and they're both the same aperture lens, they're f2.8, so I'm gonna take the photo at f2.8 and trying to get a photo of Aaron's eye. But then at the same time, you guys try to look at the background. So this is the closest distance I can focus, okay? Look at Aaron's ear, for example. Okay, I'm gonna take a photo. I'm gonna change the lens and then I'm gonna show you how you can get different results with the macro lens. Trying exactly the same settings, but this time I can go so much closer. And I'm not even the closest focusing distance. I can go completely that close to it. And as you can see on the pictures, the macro lens, because you can go so much closer to the subject, the background starts to just blur away. So there's another tip. Use macro lenses versus usual lenses, because macro lenses can focus closer to the subject, which means the background will be more blurry. So tip number 6 is that you're gonna put something in front of your lens to make the bokeh effect. So for example, in here, Aaron, just stand over there. I'm just gonna take a picture of Aaron. Here you can see that there is a little bit of bokeh balls on the side over there, but there's not that much bokeh. But now, I'm just gonna take these fairy lights. A lot of people use this. So if you have a bit of fairy lights, and if you just place it in front of your lens and play with it, you can see that you can get so much more bokeh. Because often you don't have to have the bokeh in the background, it can be also in the foreground. And it doesn't have to be lights, you can put whatever in front of the lens to kind of make this blurry. It doesn't have to be background, it can also be foreground, because then separating the subject from the scene. So for example, I'm just gonna take this decorative tree over here. And if I'm just gonna shoot that exact same thing, like trying to take the same picture of Aaron, but because I'm shooting it through that tree, you can see that there's just a bit of blurriness in it. So, tip number 6 is you can also put something in the foreground in front of the lens to get that bokeh effect. So, and the last 7th tip is that use a camera that has a bigger sensor inside. So I'm gonna give you a very radical example. What this is, I'm gonna take a picture with my cell phone. As you can see, this is around 31mm camera, which is pretty much equivalent to 35. And I'm gonna just take a picture of Aaron over here. And now I'm gonna take the same photo with this camera. Remember, it's f1.9. I'm gonna match the setting. Just for the sake of it, I'm just gonna put f2. As you can see, comparing these two photos, that the photo that has been taken with the smartphone has much less background blur than the one taken with this camera, and matching the settings, kind of similar. You know, you can see that it has much more background blur, and it is only due to because the sensor size inside this is a full frame sensor, whereas this is tiny, tiny, tiny sensor. And this is just how it works, which means that bigger size sensor you have in the camera is the more background blur you're gonna get as well. Even if you use the same settings on your lens, you get more blur with bigger size camera bodies. Thank you so much guys for watching this episode of Tech Notice. I hope you got some tips how you can get more bokeh in your videos. Now, if you're an expert video or photo shooter, you already know this, and you know, don't give your hate comments in the comment section below, but give your tips what you think. Is this something you can add to this video? Is there any other tips how people who are starting out with photo and video would get more background blur without spending loads of money on lenses and gear? If you did find this video helpful, please leave a like. I would massively appreciate that. And remember, videos are coming out every single week, so if you like this content, stay tuned for more videos like this. Now, if you're new here and you're wondering, what's happening? Whoa, what's this guy? What is this? Then welcome. My name is Lauri. This is Tech Notice. We do weekly videos about technology and camera gear, videography, because I love that kind of stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you should subscribe, because, you know, this is an awesome channel for you. And I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.